Who's winning the LABR fantasy leagues, expert leagues? Who is doing well for the O's and for the Nats? And we get the news of the day, that and a whole lot more. How should we use Ohtani in expert leagues? We'll talk about that and all those on the Fantasy Baseball Podcast with Steve Gardner coming up next. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with USA Today's Steve Gardner. Steve is also the head honcho for the League of Alternative Baseball Reality Expert Leagues, LABR, as we like to call him. And he's just an all-around fine guy. Good golfer, good taste in music. Steve, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff. And thanks for inviting me on the podcast today. Haven't been talking about baseball for a while on these sorts of things. So it's good to get back in the swing of things and chat with you too.
Well, and I cherish the baseball podcast because, we're at the point in the season now where Sirius XM, we're doing more football than baseball talk. So I still get my baseball fix here this way, which I love. So happy to do it. You're beating the heck out of us in mixed LABR, the February draft. What's the secret to your success this year?
Well, I think a lot of luck has been involved in it, but drafting well. There's some guys that I liked. I mean, the fact that Pete Alonso has been very good, JT Realmuto has been very good. It's one of those, I don't know. My leagues are up and down. And I think one of the things that I've in looking at all of my leagues, I went heavier on offense than I did on pitching. And the teams that aren't doing well are the ones where that pitching just has not come through for me. So This was a league where everything sort of seemed to come together on offense, and I've been able to fudge the pitching as best I can.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I'm starting to go through like kind of a exam of my teams. It's a mid-mortem, not a post-mortem.
Right.
And I'm finding, at least I started on the NFBC platform because I've got 11 teams in that there. 5 of which are draft champions formats. I think are you in the Speakers League with us? First Pitch Arizona Speakers, that's one of them. And then 4 others, 6 where I have Fab, but in the non-draft champions formats, universally, I have more pitching points than hitting points. Like every single one of my teams there, which is interesting. Some are in different degrees of competitiveness. I have some teams that are doing very well. Others that you need some work still, but all of them, I'm doing better in pitching than hitting. It's very weird. I don't feel like I have that bias, but maybe I do.
I took all your hitting points, I guess, because I'm just looking at that Speakers League, and I'm second in the most hitting points and the second or third fewest in pitching. So that league falls into the same sort of pattern. And I don't know. I wonder if, maybe thinking about the dead ball or the deadened ball we were supposed to get at the start of this season. Maybe I was pushing down pitching and figuring that if everybody is going to be worse or better, the hitters were going to be worse and the pitchers were going to be better, then maybe it would be easier to find those late round bargains. And my hit rate has not been great.
Yeah. And it might very well be true. And my hit rate on finding hitters might not be great. Also, I think that's almost certainly is one of the cases there too. So it's interesting. I think it's instructive to kind of analyze your team halfway through and see where you're doing that, and not just look, okay, I need to improve on stolen bases, but see if there's a global issue, see if there's anything you need to like shore up, and do it again at the end of the season. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And before the All-Star break, I think we have the natural, when you have time off, around the All-Star break where you don't have to make those lineup decisions and everything, that's the time that people generally use to recharge and reevaluate. And the midpoint of the season is already here. And the All-Star break, is later in the season, and you don't have as much time to catch up if you wait until then. So if you get a little jump on it, you can help yourself out a little bit.
Yeah. Joel asks, having so many teams, how do you deal with Fab? Not very well sometimes. I try to start Saturday night. It's a tip I learned from Toby from Batflip Crazy. I think he does his on Saturday nights as well, especially if you have kids. I think that's, although my kids are older now, but I think that's a start. But it's a cheat because this is my job. It is fantasy. So I'm a little lucky is that I can pull that off. I don't have a real job now. I have family stuff. I have other things to do, but I think that's part of it. Not all of these leagues are fab leagues. I do have 20 rotisserie leagues though. And I think 14, there are some with different deadlines. Some are first come, first serve. It can do a couple of different ways of handling it there.
I'll tell you what, one thing that I have done, and it has worked for me, is sometimes as you're going through during the week, to just, put a guy's name into your fab queue for $1 fab, and then you can go back just so you don't forget that guy. And then when you come back on Saturday or Sunday, you can say, oh, yeah, that's right. I meant to, if somebody gets called up or something happens during the course of the week that triggers you to say, oh, I need to make sure that I pick up, the backup outfielder in Pittsburgh or whatever. Right. And then you can go back and then tweak the bid values. But you have those players already located. You don't have to scroll through the player lists and that sort of thing. I found that helps me a little bit to at least save some of the time with all those teams that I have.
I think that's a great idea, is to try to do that. Now, the tricky part is also having on multiple platforms. Like the labor leagues are on RT, the tout leagues are on Roto, NFBC. I've got all these teams. I've got some leagues on RotoWire's commission service. It's okay. Where do I have this? Where do I have that? But one thing I also do every day is I have a folder of links of all my leagues in one folder, and I open them all up in tabs. And each day, okay, what happened last night on this team? Who's hurt? What do I? So I'll make some notes. Maybe it's a mental note. Maybe I'll do what you do and like add a transaction there. And there's a couple leagues where I also have like daily moves too. The daily move leagues are the ones that actually kick my butt the most, especially like Saturday morning. You get an early start on a Saturday morning, or that Peacock game now. The Peacock game. I'm so mad.
For the West Coast folks, I know.
Oh, it's terrible. But I cannot stand it. Same thing with like your local Nats on 4th of July. I mean, why do you have to play at 8:00 my time? Why? Come on. It's just so unfriendly. And then it happened to be on a Monday this year. It's just all that much more painful. Like in some leagues globally, my roster locks. I know that it's in one of my Yahoo leagues that's like that. All my score sheet leagues are like that. Early starts to begin the week are the bane of my existence.
Do you get the advantage though? Do any of your leagues have first come, first serve waivers? So if something happens in the the Dodgers Padres game, that you can snap somebody up?
Yeah, I do have that. Sure, absolutely. And it is a Yahoo league where I have first come, first serve. Actually, I'm in 2 first come, first serve pickup leagues. Both happen to be on Yahoo. One of those, you set your lineup weekly, but you can make pickups constantly. It's an interesting dichotomy there. But obviously you can't start your guy you picked up until the following week. So that at least there's that constraint in there. But yeah, I struggle with the daily and just the non-standard start times all over the place.
Yeah. That's one thing. If somebody asks me to play in a new league, and the first question I ask them, is it daily transactions or weekly? And if they say daily, it's like, I don't think so.
Thank you for inviting me. Yes.
It's just difficult to be able to handle all of those things. I've got one league, an auto new league, that is daily moves, and constantly I'm frustrated when I'm not checking the lineups at the right time, and I miss out on say a Suzuki coming back off the IL, that sort of thing.
Well, especially because Otternew freezes 5 minutes before the start of the game too, and so I always remember, oh shoot, this is about to start. Oh, it's already too late, and I didn't get my starting pitcher in there that's got a great matchup because you're rotating guys in and out. I get caught up on that too with Otternew, but that's a fun format also. Although we play standard Roto rules, but Otternew roster management rules, so still have the 40-man roster and the $400 budget and all that. But it's fun. It's a fun format. How many leagues do you play in?
I'm at 13, I think. 13 or 14. across the spectrum with a couple of sim leagues, and mostly roto.
Yeah, I've got 20 roto leagues, 4 score sheet,
Wow.
1 strat league, and I thought I was only at 17, and then I counted up when I was doing this exercise, like, because I always say I stop counting after 10. It's kind of my joke, but it's kind of true. And I was like, oh, I have 20. Oh, what was I thinking? Yeah.
And now you get the football season coming in, and then it's the avalanche right there.
Exactly. So there's 4 labor leagues, correct?
Yes.
AL, NL, mixed auction, and then the mixed draft that we do in February. You play in all 4 of those, correct?
I play in just the 3. The mixed auction, the one that we added a couple years ago, Ray Murphy from Baseball HQ has taken over as the commissioner of that.
Okay,
so
good.
He plays in that league. So at least, he can take care of that for me, and I can sit back and try and run the other 3 to the best of my abilities.
So you got yourself some help. That's nice. I like it.
Well, it was one of those things that, not to get too into the weeds, but, when Baseball HQ decided to do the First Pitch Florida conference, and they wanted to add a mixed league there at the conference to do live, that's how we sort of said, well, why don't we do a mixed auction league? And so little negotiating, little push and pull there. And so I got Ray to say, okay, I'll be the commish for that. And we're like, got a deal. So looking forward to getting back in person again.
Amen.
For drafts and everything, because this has been an awfully long time since 2020.
Now, the NFBC has been able to go live, but the expert community hasn't had live drafts the last 2 years. And you had like the last one. You had labor in early March 2020. Right. And then after that, we had to shut it down for tout like a week before. And then we thought we were going to be able to pull it off this year. Yeah, no, still no. But next year we're going to do this. I really miss it. Looking forward to it. As someone who runs a league, we always have to debate on rules questions, and Shohei Ohtani keeps raising the bar on that one for us here.
Wow.
If you were able to get his hitting and pitching stats in the same week, he'd be the 1.1. And now that we have a universal DH, I feel like we can pull this off. I feel like commission systems should be able to handle it better. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the main drawback for counting pitching and hitting stats, is that you'd get, every terrible pitcher going 0 for 4, right. And, your batting average gets weighted down and they don't contribute anything, short of a rare Madison Bumgarner or Zach Greinke home run. So, but now, if the DH is in both leagues, we don't have to worry about those pitchers weighing down the stats, and you truly get the value of what Shohei Ohtani means. That's a great question. And I think it's not so much now the fantasy community being willing to embrace counting those stats. I think it's now over to the technology companies, and the host sites. Can they technologically fit that into whatever their software is allowed to do? I think that's the next barrier that we have to cross, and so the ball is proverbially in their court now. Yeah,
I especially think this is the way to go in auction leagues. I'm going to be pushing for it in tout. I don't know if I'm going to get it. Get everybody to come along board with me on this one here, but I think if we can do it tech wise, I think we should do it. I really think it's the proper way to value a player, and you can put a price on it. That's the thing. Right. You don't, it's not like you have this prohibitive 1.1 advantage with Ohtani. No, we actually can price it in. You think he's that big of a difference maker? Spend 60 on him. Spend 63.
That would be a fun thought experiment. If Shohei Ohtani can give you the hitting and the pitching stats, how much higher would you go? That would be fun to, maybe we do a tout table or something about that, because I can see how he would definitely be the most valuable player, and by a fairly large margin. If you could have, 8 other pitchers or 9 other pitchers and have him as a hitter, slot him in your lineup however you want.
Yeah. The mechanics need to be worked out, but I think it's doable. I want to see it happen. And to the argument that it's in a draft, it may not be fair. You have a point. However, let's see it happen first. Let's see, how many times does he get skipped in a start? There's still the injury risk as a pitcher.
Right. That would be the thing for me is the injuries. It not only takes away, a star player, but it takes away a hitter and a pitcher that you're going to be starting. So I'll tell you, Ian Kahn and I in XFL had this discussion last year, maybe toward the end of last year, about trying to acquire in that league. It's Ohtani the hitter and Ohtani the pitcher, and the fact that they count as only one keeper, but you play them separately. We were talking about what would we give up to be able to acquire both Ohtanis? And the one drawback that Ian was all for it, and I was just a little bit hesitant because he hadn't had that one healthy season yet, and this was early before he actually did in his MVP year. So the injury risk, if you lose Ohtani, the hitter and pitcher, they both are generally on the IL. So that's where it's a big risk because it's a great reward, but it also can really hurt you.
For sure. So very fascinating topic. We could go on, make it an Ohtani cast, but we're not going to do that. We're going to move on. There's been a lot of other news of the day. Before we hit the news of the day, quick note from our sponsors on the Blue Wire Network. Every one of RotoWire's fantasy podcast on any sport is on the Blue Wire Network, so we appreciate their hosting and your indulgence in listening to the ads. I'm here with Steve Gardner from USA Today. You can check out Steve on all of his work. You can check him out on Twitter. His handle there is Steve A. Gardner. Steve, let's talk trade deadline. We saw two pitchers this week go on the IL, Tyler Mahle and Frankie Montas. Both guys are considered possible guys that could get dealt. It's a pretty small market for starting pitchers. There's not a whole lot of them. Like the one that comes to my mind is Luis Castillo. I talked to a Pittsburgh guy today. Said maybe Jose Quintana, but I haven't heard too many starting pitchers' names bandied about so far.
No, I haven't either. And, it's focusing mostly on, the hitters and guys that are going to become free agents at the end of the year. Wilson Contreras, I think, is probably the guy that's most talked about. What will the Cubs do with him? But every year we see the most sought after position is pitching. And whether it's starting pitching or relief pitching, the contenders can't have enough of it. And so, if we've seen too, teams trade for starting pitchers who have been on the injured list. They've needed pitching so badly that they'd even, would go ahead and trade for a guy on the IL if they think that he can help him down the road. So maybe it may not prevent Mahle, from getting traded if he's not back yet. It is a big hurdle though. So it's a bad time if you're a pitcher on a bad team to be ailing.
Yeah, it certainly hurts the Reds' chances of maxing out his value. That's for sure. But I feel like it's like separated this year. There's a better word for it there. There's a lot more like real losing teams and real winning teams right now. They're the Pirates, the Reds, the Nats, unfortunately. The A's. You got a lot of clear non-contenders, not even triers. The Cubs, another team that's not even trying this year.
Right.
And yet I don't see too many obvious names. Let's look at the Nats. So you cover, you're in the DC area. You see a lot of the Nats and the O's. Once, the O's are the more optimistic franchise.
Yeah, I know. And they're one of those teams that doesn't come to mind as well as they played lately as a tanking team, because I think after this winning streak, they've won 4 in a row and they're like 5 games below 500. Not thinking playoffs, but I still think, this is that stepping stone, perhaps that stepping stone year to finally becoming relevant again. And the excitement is there in Baltimore, especially ever since I think you can trace it to Adley Rutschman being called up.
Yep.
Whereas in Washington, it's just been this long slog through the season so far. Juan Soto is not even producing, to get everybody excited and keep them coming to the ballpark. And Steven Strasburg not being able to come back and be the pitcher that, Washington has wanted to celebrate since winning the World Series in 2019. And he hasn't been able to do that, hasn't been healthy enough. So, I mean, when those two guys, your biggest stars, are really not producing, it's tough. And the Nationals, being in the NL East too, they're getting just pounded by everybody.
Absolutely. And you'll always have 2019 that gives you credit a little bit, but it helped them save face after they didn't retain Bryce Harper, and the whole deferred contract offer, being deceptive about how much they were really offering him and all that. But this is a team that's looking to sell. The owner is looking to sell the franchise as a whole, and not necessarily sell off more players right now. But that the goodwill is gone, I think, at this point in time.
It's running low. I'll say that. And, I look back at what could the Nationals have done to avoid anything like this. You look at, could they have not given Strasburg that big contract? Well, he just been the World Series MVP and had his best season. And he was on a relative discount for a while. It was kind of a reward. And it was, do you sign Strasburg? Do you sign Anthony Rendon? That was really the question that offseason. And, judging from what Rendon has done with the Angels, you can't say that, signing him would have been the right decision. So where do you go? Where do you go from there?
Do you sign somebody else instead, I guess, is the argument. But
but then you get the fans in an uproar because Strasburg has been there from the beginning, and has been a fan favorite. It's a tough situation. And as you alluded to, now with the word that the Lerner family is considering selling the franchise, you've got this Juan Soto potential big money contract. Is the franchise more attractive to buy if it doesn't have that contract, or is it more attractive if you have Juan Soto locked up long term? That's the question that's there's really no answer to right yet.
Oh, absolutely true. And I was just gonna say it was pitched as Strasburg versus Rendon, and neither was the win there. That was really tough. Carter Kieboom hasn't developed as they had hoped. They haven't really developed the young starting pitchers. Maybe Josiah Gray, who they traded for in the Scherzer deal. I mean, he's coming off a great outing. He's had lots of glimpses this year. Been hit hard a couple of times too. I know a lot of people have gotten the whipsaw with him, but I'm relatively optimistic about Gray. I just need more.
Yep.
And they've been a little unlucky with some of their prospects. Robles is another guy that hasn't developed too. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm optimistic, with Josiah Gray in particular. I mean, the stuff is there, and his problem is just allowing the long ball. And every time it seems like he gets into trouble, it's when he gives up home runs in bunches. And that's the frustrating thing. But then you look at his ERA and it's right around 4. And despite all of those, that's a pretty decent accomplishment in a park that, as the weather gets warmer, becomes a pretty good home run park.
Yeah, it does. I was there on the trade deadline a few years ago. Steven Matz got just lit up for the Mets on that day. And they actually used a position player pitching that day before it became like everybody using position player pitchings. But it was that sort of strafing. I just remember that one pretty vividly. Joel asks, bad year for Juan Soto, or is this some sort of new normal for him?
I think it's just the fact that there's not a whole lot around him. Remember at the beginning of the year, I think his first 7 home runs were all solo home runs.
Yeah.
And when he's got Rendon and all of those guys around him, it was just, it was a wonderful environment. And now, Josh Bell is having a decent season, But otherwise, there's really nobody at the top of the lineup that gets on base. And then once Soto inevitably gets walked, which, he's still taking his walks on a regular basis and having a great OBP, but certainly from a fantasy aspect, you don't get all the value of the counting numbers when he's doing that as much as he is.
No, you certainly do not. And yeah, that's definitely that's frustrating too. When you see that happening there a lot. Meanwhile, Josh Bell behind him though is having a very good season.
He is hitting for average, power,
yeah,
and at least Soto's out there on the base paths a lot for him to drive him in.
Would you sell him if you're the Nats? Thinking that this is his best season, or do you build around him?
I kind of think you have to. His contract, I believe he signed a 2-year deal, so he's going to be a free agent at the end of this season. And really, if you look up and down the Nats roster, who do they have other than Josh Bell to be able to trade? There was all the nonsense about, will they trade Juan Soto? That's certainly not going to happen. But Josh Bell, there you go. There's somebody that could possibly bring, prospects or more help at the major league level, perhaps a younger player. First base should generally be easy enough to find, in terms of position players, if you're going to fudge it. So, yeah. And to have a switch hitter who's having a great season probably will be, if Soto doesn't go to the All-Star game, Josh Bell is the guy from the franchise. Nobody else is really having an All-Star caliber season. I think they have to explore trading him. And it would surprise me terribly if they didn't find a suitor for him before the deadline.
Yeah, I think, there's plenty of teams that could use Josh Bell. Absolutely agree with that. How about the O's? A lot of good things happening with them. Unfortunately, we don't get to see Grayson Rodriguez. Otherwise, I'd really be excited about that. But we'll see DL Hall at some point. You look at their farm system; they got a lot of guys loaded in that farm system. There's a lot to be optimistic about on this side.
Absolutely. Another name to note: Gunnar Henderson.
Yes,
infielder, very high on prospect lists. Probably going to be up. Certainly, I would think next year we would see him in the major leagues.
Just hit for the cycle in AAA, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, or maybe even at the end of this year. Wouldn't that be something? But yeah, the things are starting to turn around, and they're getting just phenomenal pitching out of the bullpen this year. And I think it may be a situation like Seattle last year. Remember when the Mariners were a lot better than their Pythagorean record and everything because they were so good in one-run games. I think the Orioles, because their bullpen has just been so good with these unknown or relatively unknown pitchers, it's making them look a lot better from a win-loss standpoint, from a statistical standpoint. And, maybe that's a little bit of a Camden Yards effect when you're moving the fence back and in left field and moving it, the wall is higher. People were criticizing them all over the place at the beginning of the season saying, what are they doing? And I have to say, you look at what the results have been for them this year, they look like they were right.
Yeah. And again, it's heating up. We'll see if it carries a little bit more in the heat of the summer here, because both ballparks do tend to play that way a little bit more in the summertime. So we'll see what happens. But they've got some fun little hitters. They're talking about maybe trading Anthony Santander away as he's a good player, but probably not an essential player for their next roster build. And if there's a limited supply of guys that are talent that's available, maybe that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and the farm system is pretty well stocked with outfielders too. So if you can get a pitching prospect or a position player in the infield or whatever, that might be a good way to go, because Santander, good power from both sides of the plate, and it's decent enough that he can play the outfield or he can DH. So yeah, in terms of their trade chips, he's got to be one, and Jorge Lopez may be a trade chip.
Oh yeah. He's having a career year. He's adding velocity, but these things are fleeting. We know that. This happens all the time with that. So we'll see what happens. But I do like a lot of what they've done. They need to get the depth in the starting pitching. They need these guys to develop, and maybe the moving the wall back does help aid in that development too. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. Dean Kramer actually struggled a little bit this week. I used him for a 2-stepper this week.
Yeah.
I'd love to see John Means in that ballpark stay healthy. Second major injury for him, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know what he's going to be like when he comes back.
Yeah, and that was he was one of those guys that I was really excited about coming into this season because left-handed pitcher, you stack the opposing lineup with right-handed hitters, and they hit it out to the depths there in left center. It seemed to be perfect for him, and with him not being able to pitch hardly at all, that we'll have to wait until next year, and then hopefully we can see the results for him.
Yeah, for sure. We got a later trade deadline this year than usual because of the lockout. I think it's like August 12th, I want to say. It's not July 31st like it used to be.
I thought it was August 2nd.
So, it's just a couple days then. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's a weekend thing maybe, or
maybe
having
so.
it on the Sunday night or anything like that. So
all right, for some reason I deluded myself into thinking it was significantly later, but I think you're more on top of that than I am on that. But
it's better for fantasy purposes.
It is August 2nd, yeah,
because you have that Monday, Tuesday. So if the Fabapalooza with players crossing, from the AL to the NL in only leagues on Sunday night, will it be all done by then, or those last 2 days? Well, if you miss out on somebody that first weekend, you might be able to pick somebody up.
That's right.
Second time around.
Do you go after that like B+ player and spend your fab then, or do you wait and see if that A player comes over? Now, what's your general philosophy and fab when it comes to only leagues and an AL only league, NL only league? Do you hold on so that you can have the hammer, or do you just fab away all season long?
I try to hold some back because generally it's not just one player, it's several players that come over and switch leagues at the deadline that can be impact players. And sometimes, that can backfire on you. I remember one year in NL Tout Wars, I had the hammer and I was just waiting for that deadline and all those big pieces. And the biggest name that came over to the NL was Travis Snyder.
Oh,
remember that? And
I remember being a Travis Snyder fan at one point in time. But
and I had like $60 some of fab left, or the equivalent, almost 70% of my fab. It's like, well, what else am I going to spend it on? So 69 on Travis Snyder, it did not work out so well.
Yes.
Generally, I was going to say there are more than one impact type players. So even if you don't have the most, if you can save, a decent amount and get the second or third or fourth, make the other guys that have even more, make the call and sweat over it and just say, okay, I'll take any of the top three and I'll bid whatever is $1 more than the next guy in the pecking order has.
Yeah, and that's actually ideal from a couple of ways too, because then you may not have to blow all of your money, and labor in particular is so important because there's no $0 bids, there's no trading of fab. Can you cash in injured players to get some fab back? Is that possible?
Yes,
I think so.
You can.
I should be doing that big time.
And the thing too is that in the AL and NL labor this year, we had our little strange hiccup with the lockout to where we had a bunch of free agents at the start of the season after we've drafted. And so we shelled out a lot of fab to get the Carlos Correas and Chris Bryants. So generally, most everybody has a lot less, and has had a lot less all through the season than they normally would. So this will be a little bit of uncharted territory for a lot of us when, players start changing leagues and we have to figure out, we got $13 of fab left. How much am I going to bid on Luis Castillo if he's coming to the AL?
Right, exactly. So I loved what you did there, setting aside those 10 players, created, instant content. Great to write about it and think about it. But it's just fun. I mean, fun to be able to have that. And, of course, you run the risk like it's going to be disproportionately in favor of one league and the other. How'd that work out? Was it?
Yeah, it was. There were definitely a lot more in the AL than there
Okay.
were in the NL. I think of the top, we took the top 12 out of the picture, and we're not allowed to draft. And I think 9 of them went to the AL and 3 to the NL, or was it the reverse? Crap. It was more in the NL than the AL. I think that's what it was.
I think you're right.
So yeah, it was.
And how wild did the spending get?
We got up into the 70s for a couple of people.
Okay.
I went 77 on Carlos Correa in AL, so that kind of hamstrung me for a bit. But here's the way that I look at it is, if we're supposed to be, quote unquote experts, in this fantasy industry, then let's throw something out there. We have an unprecedented situation. Let's throw something out there where there is no set strategy. Nobody knows how to attack this. Let's see, what kind of philosophies we get. Let's see if people want to go all in, people want to hold back, maybe try and find a bargain or something like that, and have fun with it, instead of, fretting about what are we going to do and this has broken the league. We're going to draft when we're going to draft.
We're all drafting under the same set of rules.
Exactly. Yep. So just give it another challenge to overcome. And I was really happy that it seemed like everybody in the leagues embraced that. So we had a good time with it.
Our late great friend Lauren Michaels always used to say, just tell me the rules ahead of time. I'll figure out how to beat you with them. Exactly.
And he would.
Yep. Absolutely. So I think it's just fun too. And I think it's a fun exercise, and just, like you said, creates new strategy. And I think you get a guy for the whole season long. It's a whole lot different than getting a guy in September for 2 starts. I think that I would have probably gone big, is what I'm saying. I probably would have been one of those guys that would have spent big on one of those guys and hoped I would have gotten them. So should be fun to, it's fun. Now you just have to manage the rest of the way, and it's not like you can't trade other players to address your weaknesses. You just can't trade fab. You're going to be getting a lot of $1 bids on guys instead.
Yep. I have a feeling you're right.
Yeah. Let's keep rolling here with a couple other news items here. We mentioned Soto. He is back in the lineup, fortunately. So, if you started him for the week, you're getting him back for most of the week, at least. He even got the pinch hit walk, and I got him in XFL. That matters. I have him in an OBP league, so at least I got that.
And they were the early game, the real early game this week. So you had to make that call, and he wasn't in the starting lineup, but he did come in as a pinch hitter. So. Yeah, I had him in a couple of leagues and said, I'm rolling the dice. Let's do it.
Such a impactful player that you have to a little bit there. Craig Kimbrell came back, faced all 3 batters. He retired all 3 batters he faced, actually got a win. Some people might have benched him for the week. Some people whose last names rhyme with Carrickson might have done that in a league. And I did that in TGFBI. I benched him this week, thinking that might be more than 2 days. But so I missed out on a win there. Just another bullet point in my master class there for that league. Just nailed it there. But do the Dodgers, do they need to go out and get an improvement over Kimbrell for the rest of the year as a closer? Do they do it internally? What do they do?
I don't know that they're, if they, let's say Jorge Lopez, since we're talking about him, I don't think he would be somebody that they would put in ahead of Kimbrell. I think they're going to ride with him, and that's the one thing with Craig Kimbrell is we've seen him have some rough stretches and kind of ride it out and come back around again. We've seen Dave Roberts do something similar when Kenley Jansen was struggling, in past years. So I think as long as the issue for the Dodgers, I think, and why they might want to go out and get somebody like a Jorge Lopez, maybe not to close, but because Daniel Hudson is out for the rest of the season. You can't really lean on Brusdar Graterol, for all of those 8th inning setup situations. So, and then, if something does happen and Kimbrell can't work 3 days in a row, you can have somebody to come in and put out the fire, for those specific situations. So I don't know that they'd get a closer replacement, but they definitely, I think, need some bullpen help. So they'll be a buyer.
One good note from the Dodgers bullpen, name to keep an eye on, Evan Phillips. Has been pitching very well. He's been getting holds lately. I think he's up to 10 holds now. I added him in a score sheet league just this week, only score sheet league, because you always try to patch. You can find guys that you can patch in to build that bullpen. You don't always have to use premium draft picks on good relievers. But Phillips is a guy to keep an eye on. He might be pretty good someday.
Yeah, and I've seen in some deep leagues, NL only types, where he's been picked up over the last couple of weeks, just because great ratios and getting strikeouts and possibility of vulture wins.
Exactly right. Another name to keep an eye on, Ty France, might be coming back soon. Mariners really could use him. Is interesting. They traded for Carlos Santana once France got hurt. I thought that might have implied that France was going to be gone for a while, but instead he's set to return for the series. I think that begins tonight. So it could be activated as early as there. It's a grade 2 flexor strain in his left elbow. Had that kind of bend like Max Muncy did.
Mm-hmm. And that looked painful at the time. And I was afraid. I've loved Ty France for a while, and so that hurt me on several teams. And I was afraid that he was going to be out for an extended period of time. The thing is, though, is that because France has that position flexibility, they can still play Carlos Santana at first base if they want and put Ty France at second base. And, that may be one of the things that they consider when everybody's healthy.
Right.
Adam Frazier's not been that great by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
So, depending on pitching matchups, things like that, I could see them shuffling Ty France around a little bit because he does have that versatility.
Absolutely agree with you there. People don't realize how good Ty France has been. At least I hadn't, because I don't have him anywhere. Even it's not like I was anti Ty France. I mean, he's had 3 straight years of this sort of level of production, but he's been super strong. The one thing is he doesn't add any speed at all. We know that, but we're talking 20 to 25 home run power with a good average, and that'll play anywhere.
Yeah, and I think average was his biggest selling point during draft season, but the power that he's hit for this year has been quite the bonus.
How early are you taking his teammate Julio Rodriguez next year?
Ooh, this was a while back. Were you part of that? It was like the second half mock draft. There were a bunch of people that got involved with that.
I didn't do the mock this year. No, I did. I did the NFBC's Memorial Day contest last year. That was a lot of fun.
Okay.
They didn't run it this year, unfortunately.
There was in that I think I had a back in, at the turn, it wasn't 1-2, so it would be at the 3-4 turn. He was still there, and I took Starling Marte and immediately regretted it.
Yeah.
And I think Joe Sheehan was the guy that ended up with Julio in maybe even the 5th round. And that just jumped out. It didn't take very long to say, whoa, there's no way anybody's getting Julio in the 5th round. And he's continued to get better and better and better since then. This was like Memorial Day. So you can imagine how high, he's, vaulted from there. I think he's a borderline first rounder. I mean, when you're talking possibly 40, 45 steals, I mean, he's a better Starling Marte probably will hit for a better average, but he's a better version, I think a more valuable version of what we all wanted with Starling Marte in this year or last year or in his prime. Maybe a little bit more power. I think, yes, definitely. So a Starling Marte with power, that's a borderline first rounder, even if he's only playing in his sophomore season in the majors.
Yeah, Starling Marte, fine player, but I think Julio's got the higher upside now, and that's. And the funny thing is, they both kind of play in parks that suppress their power a little bit, and yet, you still see the production there from Julio, and I mean, he could. There's some that have argued he could be 1.1 next year. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm also not dismissing it. I'm kind of like I need to revisit. Let's see what the numbers are at the end of the year, and see how teams adjust to him.
Yeah, that's the perfect thing to think about, because we've had players come in and have instant success. The question is, what do pitchers then do to adjust to whatever holes may be in his swing, or places where they feel like they can attack him? Then he has to make the adjustments in turn, and that's where we find out, where he's going to be, what his value is going to be for the long term. But yeah, from just what we've seen this year, that's a hugely high ceiling. I don't know that I would get, certainly not over Trey Turner, Acuna, Tatis, Jose Ramirez. But after, I think those guys, it could be, anybody coming after that.
I can
depending on what happens the rest of this year.
Yeah, I can see it for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and with Tatis, we just don't know. I mean,
right?
What sort of version of the player are we going to have? I mean, this is a guy that still never got his shoulder fixed, and now it's kind of coming back from a wrist injury. At some point, I'm still waiting. I only have him in one league. I felt like I got the discount, but apparently it wasn't a big enough discount. But we'll see. I got him at like 153 overall, which was as low as he went. But
yeah, I mean, here's the thing about that. If we take a little detour, I mean, we're only at the midpoint of the season, and if anybody who is waiting for a DeGrom or a Tatis or even a Lance McCullers or somebody like that hasn't shown up yet, don't take the L just yet, because we knew, and when you drafted, you knew that they were going to be out for a good chunk of the season, right? And you've been able to replace that person in your lineup and get not comparable stats, but at least some middling accumulative stats.
Right.
So then if they can come back and, DeGrom is healthy, we know we've seen what he can do in half a season. We've seen what Tatis can do in, not a full season. After leading, tying for the major or the National League in home runs in however many games he played a year ago, he can cram an awful lot of production into half a year. So as tempting as it might be for those folks that, have been waiting this long and it feels like forever, those guys could be coming back fairly soon and could start giving you some production. And it may turn out to be, pretty smart pick.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's hope. At least DeGrom is on his rehab assignment. I wish if we have seen that progress by now, I feel a little bit better about Tatis. Live batting practice even would be great at this point in time, but we'll see.
Chris Sale, another one of those guys.
Oh yeah,
maybe coming close to getting back to Boston.
He's got his clubhouse tamper tantrum in midseason for him, so we got that going.
Yes, that was a fun story, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was so funny. His first rehab went so well. He was like buying things for the team and all that. This one, he just was like throwing a tantrum after like walking a guy and getting pulled. But I still think he's probably coming back in his next outing. We'll see. But he's going to be back really soon. What do you expect? What sort of level do you expect him to be?
I took Chris Sale on a couple of teams, so I'm including him in that that group of players that hasn't come back. The Red Sox have been better than I suspected, especially without him fronting that rotation. They need him back, so I'm cautiously optimistic, because when he gets on the mound, he was decent last year, just didn't have the stamina to be able to go deep into games. I think he's going to get the opportunity a little bit better. He's another season beyond surgery, so he'll have that going for him. I'm keeping an eye on him and maybe banking on him a little bit more than I should. But I think some good things are in store for Chris Sale.
Yeah, I think so too. I've got him a couple of DCs, got him early in drafts, and that's and after all the setbacks, I didn't get him once, but because I had a harder time putting a price on him. So we'll see.
AL labor. If I'm going to make a move, I need him to do something.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. So what else are you doing this summer? I think you're a golfer, right?
I do. I try and play. And I have not been as successful in getting out this year as I have in previous years. But I enjoy, certainly, Jeff, when you go on your golf trips and you post pictures and see all the wonderful courses that you play.
Well, and you've played a lot of them too. That's the funny thing. And I'm going to
I lived in the Myrtle Beach area early in my career.
Okay.
And so that was one of the greatest. I mean, I was single at the time. My work schedule was, I was off by 3:00 in the afternoon, and there were discounts for locals. And so it was just, my golf game had never been better because it was so easy and so convenient to go out and play. But
Nice.
as you know, you get kids and life goes on, and you never get that. I've never gotten that opportunity to play that frequently again. But I love the game, and I keep trying to play and get better. But
yeah,
there's a level.
I'm doing my annual trip next week in the Pinehurst area. So we've been there a couple of times already, and really like it. So Tobacco Road's the one I'm really looking forward to the most. That's I love that course. But we don't actually play Pinehurst itself because it's too expensive. You have to stay on the property, blah, blah, blah. There's so many other great courses in the area.
There was when I was working in covering ACC football and basketball, every year for the football preseason, coaches, media conferences, they would have it at a resort there in the Pinehurst area. So we would play golf for a couple of days and have a tournament and maybe, an afternoon's worth of interviews and everything, and then go back and play some more golf.
There you go.
That was wonderful. Love being around there.
Yeah. It's a great area. Looking forward to that. Any other big trips this summer? Concerts? Anything you're going to be doing?
Let's see. Concerts, yes. Been to Fish already. Jimmy Buffett is coming to the area, so my wife is a huge, Jimmy Buffett Parrot Head fan. So going to do that. And there's a place not too far from where I'm living now, where we downsized a little bit, moved a little bit more suburban, closer inside the Beltway even. And there's a theater that's walking distance that has a bunch of cover bands and has actually Marshall Crenshaw and the Smithereens are coming this weekend. If you're familiar with
Smithereens,
them. So they get some decent shows down there. So yes, on those, not really. Don't have any trips in the hopper yet. But, looking forward to an exciting summer, nevertheless.
All right, very good, Steve. It's awesome always to catch up with you. Good luck on your leagues. The rest of the way, you got any pieces going up at USA Today or anywhere else?
Just had come out in Sports Weekly this week, the annual full season All-Stars piece that I put together with the help from the guys at Baseball HQ. Matt Cederholm crunches the numbers, and I just put together, basically, it's who should the All-Stars be if you take not only this year's stats, but the second half of last year's stats to give you an entire spectrum, a season's worth of production. And some interesting numbers. You can check that out, fantasy.usatoday.com, or I've got links to it on Twitter. You can just check my Twitter feed. But it was quite a big undertaking and was really fun. So that's the big thing recently.
Very cool. And you can follow Steve on Twitter at Steve A. Gardner. Steve, awesome as always talking with you. Good luck in your leagues. We'll talk again soon.
Indeed. Thanks, Jeff. Good luck to you too.
All right. We've got the 2-Star Starter podcast tomorrow with Clay and Todd. Make sure to tune in for that. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.